Now, black and white footage of an empty office at night. Light streaks through blinds. 50s-style items, a radio, desk lamp, and fan suggest a detective's office. A man in trench coat and fedora unlocks the outer door.
It had been another hot, long, miserable day.
He stands silhouetted in the doorway, then enters and removes his coat and hat.
Just when you think you're ahead of the curve, you find out you're way behind the 8-ball.
He turns on the desk lamp.
I'd been hitting the pavement all day.
He tosses papers on the desk. The front of one report reads Confidential Metro Police Homicide Case 001 CJD.
All day yesterday, and all day the day before.
He pours coffee, then sits down with the reports.
I had 4 cases on the run, each one as confusing as the last. The CJD case, the zoonosis case, the avian flu case, and the SARS case.
Lettering on the door reads Emerging Diseases Incorporated.
We're in the business of emerging diseases, and it's a back-alley fistfight we can't win. It had all started a heck of a long time ago.
Footage of the man poring over the cases shifts to color footage of crowds teeming along an urban street.
Millions of years of human evolution led to the development of natural defenses against disease.
A slide goes under a microscope, then an animation shows cells zipping past one another.
Our immune system is constantly facing new challenges as organisms mutate to get the upper hand.
A doctor examines a little girl.
Just when we think we've got them licked, they change their ways and we're back to square one.
A young woman holds her hand to her mouth.
Some of these diseases are very old. Over time, they have evolved into new and more dangerous forms.
In a lab, a technician marks a petri dish.
And some are completely new to science.
Back in the office, the man rests his head in his hand.
I started questioning the usual suspects.
Now an interview with Dr. Jennifer McKim-Breshkin, Virology Project Leader, CSIRO.
An emerging disease is a disease that has increased in incidence over about the last 20 years. Now, these diseases can arise either from a completely new organism, they can arise from an organism that's now spreading into a new ecological area. So, for example, with clearing of the rainforests in the Amazon, you're driving animals and insects out of the forests into urban areas. So you're now seeing new diseases in some of these urban areas. It can be through evolution of an existing disease that used not to be a very nasty disease, but is now emerging to become quite severe. It can be due to re-emergence of a disease that was under control, but now may have drug resistance. So things like that are TB, where it was well under control, but we are now seeing drug-resistant types of TB.
The homicide detective drops eyeglasses on the case files.
CJD, zoonosis, avian flu and SARS, emerging diseases at their worst. I'm tired. I'm beat. But I have to get onto these cases as fast as a bookie collecting a debt. A sudden outbreak of any one of these diseases will lead to a severe and devastating effect.
He turns to the radio.
An outbreak can lead to an epidemic. Then an epidemic can lead to a pandemic. If that happens, the results would be catastrophic.
Over footage of hands working at a vintage typewriter, words read summary. What is an emerging disease? More words follow.
An emerging disease is one that appears in a number of cases for the first time. It may have existed previously, but signs show its rapid increase. Although human evolution has led to the development of a natural defense against disease, many pathogens are able to co-evolve ways around these defenses. The disease organisms are constantly evolving alongside our defenses. Though some diseases are very old, over time they can evolve into new and more dangerous forms. An outbreak can lead to an epidemic.
Video playing in a gold frame shows a detective typing. Now he slaps down a file.
The first case, CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
He flips through black and white photos.
CJD is a rare and incurable brain disease that is fatal in virtually all its victims.
He holds a brain x-ray to his lamp. Then footage of the scene appears on a computer monitor in a modern lab. A man works at another computer.
It is believed to be caused by prions, short for proteinaceous infectious particles, an infectious agent that infects mammals, including humans.
An animation shows a structure made up of 4 coils connected by wavy strings. Now Dr. McKim Brushkin.
A prion disease is a disease that appears to be caused by a protein only. A lot of the diseases we're familiar with that are caused by viruses, viruses are made up of genetic material of a gene and a protein which covers that gene, whereas prions appear to only be the protein.
The coils stretch out into long strands, almost straight.
It promotes the refolding of normal cellular proteins, destroying their original function.
Researchers look at brain scans on computer monitors.
This causes cell disruption, particularly in nerve cells of the brain, leading to severe dementia and inevitably death. There are many symptoms of CJD, the first being a rapidly advanced state of dementia.
Now footage of elderly. A woman walks with a cane, another fingers an Afghan.
This is categorized by memory loss, personality changes, and hallucinations.
It can also affect you physically, so you get seizures, what they call myoclonic jerks, where you get sort of jerking of the muscle. So they're sort of the diagnostic features, and this is all because of accumulation of this mutant protein in the brain.
The majority of people affected by CJD are between the ages of 55 and 65, although there have been cases reported of people outside this age group. Although the duration of the disease can vary, in 80% of cases it is fatal within 12 months of being diagnosed.
Now a patient lies on the bed of an MRI machine. A technician encloses a casing over her face, then presses a button. The bed slides into a round tunnel where lights glow.
The symptoms can continue for years. These symptoms are caused by the progressive deterioration of the brain's nerve cells, which is associated with the buildup of abnormal prion proteins. When brain tissue from a CJD patient is examined under a microscope, many tiny holes can be seen where nerve tissue once appeared.
And this is called spongiform appearance, and this group are called the spongiform encephalopathies because they make the brain turn to sponge.
Now in an animation, an injection is discharged into a person's shoulder.
Transmission of CJD can be by products containing human growth hormone, corneal grafts, dual grafts, or electrode implants. CJD can also be inherited.
Now Asian families in a park and seated on a sidewalk.
Although it frequently appears in patients who have no family history of it.
Now, it's still extremely rare. You're looking at 1 in a million people. But this part of the population are the ones that generally are associated with the inherited CJD.
A cow chews.
It has been speculated that humans can contract the disease by consuming the meat of beef cattle infected from the bovine form mad cow disease.
A knife slices a steak off a large slab. Then in a corral, a cow slides around in the mud, its back legs collapsing under it.
And that's what has been seen in the UK primarily about the last 5 to 10 years, where they had animals that actually had BSE and people were exposed to the BSE from those infected animals. And they have a disease that's called variant CJD as opposed to the normal CJD.
Although no firm evidence exists to confirm this, it is still a fear amongst the general public.
In a bright lab, workers use pipettes and microscopes. Another writes in a thick binder.
The main means of controlling is preventing infection.
Now footage shows workers outside in full coverage outfits, coveralls, boots, gloves, hoods, goggles and masks.
So for the variant CJD, they've actually had to slaughter millions of cattle that were infected to try and prevent that being spread any further. Human and animal prions are essentially the same. So what they call the PRP protein is essentially the same in humans and animals. But there seems to be this variant of the PRP that actually causes the disease, and that can be found in either humans or animals. But they cause different diseases. So in animals you might see scrapie or BSE. In humans you might see the Creutzfeldt-Jakob or perhaps Kuru.
Now a black and white photo shows a tribesman dressed in a feather headdress and bead necklaces. He holds a bow. Then a map shows a landmass north of Australia.
Through the once prevalent custom of cannibalism, the Foray tribe in Papua New Guinea were found to contract a form of the disease known as Kuru.
In another picture, dozens of tribespeople wearing only loincloths pose outside of thatched roof homes.
Interestingly, although men were also involved in these rituals, only women and children of the tribe were found to have the disease.
In a lab, a dish with liquid goes under a scope.
The diagnosis of CJD is suspected when the typical signs of dementia and muscle deterioration are present.
A hand adjusts a dial.
Further investigation to support the diagnosis is made when one or more of the following tests is confirmed positive. Electroencephalography,
Plugs lead to a boxy unit with a dial labeled current.
the measurement of the electrical activity produced by the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid analysis.
On a magnified brain image, a solid circle marks a fibrous area.
When the clear bodily fluid that occupies the subarachnoid space and the ventricular system around and inside the brain is tested for particular protein markers that become increased in CJD. And an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, of the brain which detects alterations in brain activity. Biopsy of brain tissue from the patient may also be examined histologically in some situations.
There's currently no treatment for CJD. They've tried a number of other broad-spectrum antivirals, such as ribavirin, but they've had no effect.
In a lab, a needle pierces a sample. On another piece of equipment, a jar of green fluid is spun in a sideways circle.
So generally the outcome is fatal.
The detective flips a page.
In 2003, an experimental treatment was given to a teenager in Ireland using the medication pentosan polysulfide. While it failed to stop the progression of the disease, it allegedly slowed the symptoms. CJD is fatal, and a search for a viable treatment continues, as well as further investigation of the causative agent.
A basket on his desk reads, unsolved. Now words. Summary, CJD.
CJD is a rare and incurable brain disease that is fatal. The main symptoms are dementia and coordination dysfunction. To diagnose CJD, electroencephalography, cerebrospinal fluid sampling, and MRIs are employed. Currently, there is no cure for CJD.
The detective works at a vintage typewriter. Then he slides a drawer shut on a filing cabinet. He sits by a case file.
Case number 2. Zoonotic disease. This case has been on my desk for a long time. Some cases come, get solved, and then go. But this one, I just can't seem to get rid of it.
Now in a lab, stacked petri dishes.
Zoonoses are infectious diseases that can be transmitted from animal to humans.
A lab worker gathers a sample in a small tube, then an interview.
Normally diseases are limited to one species. They may only be limited to animals or limited to humans. But a zoonosis is one when it can spread from animals to humans.
A magnification reveals a coiled-up snail shape as big as a mosquito-like insect's head.
Many serious diseases fall under this category, like anthrax, bubonic plague, Ebola fever, and Rift Valley fever. And the carriers for these types of diseases are endless. Any animal you can think of could potentially be a carrier of zoonotic disease.
A researcher peers into kennel-like boxes draped in plastic and arranged on shelves.
Rift Valley fever is a common form of zoonosis that is caused by a virus. The mosquito is the main carrier of the disease.
Dr. Jennifer McKim-Breshkin, Virology Project Leader, CSIRO.
And the mosquitoes bite the infected carcasses or infected animals and then can transmit it to humans. Interestingly, the mosquitoes actually pass it on to their own eggs. And those eggs can maintain that virus over several years. So if there's a dry season for several years, they can still be infectious. So when water comes and the mosquitoes start hatching, they can still be infected with that virus.
Footage shows women in a desert region carrying large jugs. Another woman wades in ankle-deep murky water, filling a bucket. Then a map shows Africa.
Rift Valley fever was first identified in 1931 during an outbreak in Kenya.
Kenyan families line a long corridor, sitting in groups on the floor.
With the first known instance of the disease starting in the Rift Valley, the disease was soon tracked to other parts of Africa and even as far as Europe.
Nurses hoist a patient onto a bed. Then outside, a Red Cross flag flies and people line up.
It didn't take long for the Rift Valley fever to cross the species boundary and begin infecting humans, usually in the form of mosquito bites.
The other source of infection for humans is handling of infected carcasses. So they can either get it through aerosol infection from handling a dead carcass,
2 African men posed by the rotting skeleton of a large animal.
or from actually a cut in which you might get contaminated liquids, contaminated blood, or Rift Valley fever causes abortion. So if you're handling an aborted fetus, there's going to be a lot of blood and liquid, and you may get infected from that liquid.
A mother nurses her baby.
There have been no reports of human-to-human transmission of the disease to date.
People pass a dead animal lying in the dirt. A donkey drinks from a bucket, and more people ride donkeys.
People at high risk include those who work with animals, and anyone who enters the area of an outbreak where they may have been exposed to animal products or biting insect vectors. Generally, the symptoms of RVF are mild in comparison to CJD. Patients of RVF will experience symptoms similar to a flu-like illness with fever, weakness, back pain, dizziness, and weight loss occurring. In the more serious cases, other complications may arise.
The view scans up the bony legs of a child to his emaciated arms and oversized head.
These can include inflammation of the brain and infection of the retina, causing varying degrees of permanent blindness.
A patch is removed from a girl's eye.
There is not a lot that can be done in terms of treatment for an infected patient. In less serious cases, the patient is given supportive therapeutic treatment to assist them in recovering naturally.
A family visits a clinic.
There are vaccines for animals and insecticide spray for waterways available, which are extremely helpful. But with mosquitoes being the main carrier of the disease, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to vaccinate every animal in the infectious areas.
An exterminator outfitted in a full suit and respirator mask carries a tank with a long wand into a straw-roof building.
In terms of humans, there are some experimental human vaccines, but at this stage there's nothing really approved for humans. So probably the best means of controlling is actually controlling the vectors. So you need to control the mosquitoes, and that has to be done by trying to eradicate areas of water where the mosquitoes are breeding.
Vaccines for humans have been developed but are pretty much only used by veterinarians and people who are classed as high risk.
A lab worker mixes powder and liquid in a vial. Now in the office, the detective glances around.
No readily available vaccine. No way to stop the spread.
He slaps at a mosquito on his neck.
At least this one isn't killing people.
Birds read summary, zoonotic disease, for example, Rift Valley fever.
A zoonotic disease is one that is transmitted from animals to humans. The symptoms are usually flu-like illnesses with a fever and muscle pain. There are vaccinations for animals, but for humans they are mostly used for those at high risk, such as veterinarians.
Stripes pass over the detective at work at the typewriter. Now case file 003.
The third case I have sitting on my desk. Avian influenza, aka bird flu. Every year this seasonal disease comes around. While this disease kills thousands of birds each year, its human relative, influenza, kills 250 to 300,000 people each and every year.
A headline, vets investigate link to virus in Hungary.
As time goes by and nature evolves, new and deadlier strains of avian flu emerge. Concerns have been raised that if a variant avian flu crosses the species barrier, it may pose a serious threat to humans.
A doctor checks a patient's blood pressure. Then on the back of a vehicle, a tube shoots white fog toward a one-story building.
There are two main forms of avian flu, a high virulence and a low virulence form.
Now an interview with Dr. Jennifer McKim-Brushkin.
So what has happened with avian flu is that it has been around for many, many years in aquatic birds. They're a normal carrier of influenza A, but it hasn't actually killed the birds.
Geese, ducks and swans visit bodies of water.
Recently, there's been changes in some of these strains that have suddenly made the virus start killing these aquatic birds. With intensive farming of chickens and turkeys, some of these aquatic birds are now spreading this newer form of the disease into the domestic poultry.
Now a shot inside a factory farm chicken shed. Feeders dangle down between hundreds of birds.
The high virulent form, although rare, is extremely fatal.
In a lab, a woman uses a syringe to pierce white chicken eggs and inject a pink fluid.
Generally, it kills up to 100% of infected poultry within 48 hours of contamination. This form has also been responsible for a small number of human deaths.
A pamphlet is entitled Biosecurity in Preventing Disease, Peace of Mind, a Healthier Flock, and a More Viable Business.
It only takes 1 or 2 changes in the virus for it to mutate from a low virulent strain into a high virulent strain. Outbreaks of the low virulence form must therefore be taken very seriously. The transmission of avian flu from birds to human is generally through direct contact with infected poultry or surfaces and objects contaminated by their feces.
Back in the chicken shed, a man in coveralls walks among rows. He touches a feeder rack with his bare hand.
So the way to sort of control that is to try and educate people about how it's spread and not to come in close contact with dead animals. And people need to eat these dead animals because many of them, it's their only source of food. So this is a big problem, that if that's your only source of food, you're not going to throw away this animal because it's died. You will try and cook it and have a meal. So it's generally in the preparation that you can get infected.
On an Asian roadside, dead chickens are stacked on a table. Most have the usual pale pink flesh, while others are bright blue. A man wearing gloves pulls a bird from a steaming pot. A barehanded woman peels away the blue-black skin.
The original highly pathogenic bird flu was first seen through China and then through Southeast Asia. It's now spread to parts of Africa, and it's also been seen in parts of Europe.
A headline reads, "Bird flu may kill 750,000. Then an ambulance speeds down a street. Now in a ward, people attend to patients.
So it is becoming a global disease.
The first symptoms of avian flu in humans include sore throat, fever, muscle pains, severe headaches, coughing, weakness, and general discomfort.
And ultimately what we see is about a 60 to 70% mortality rate of people currently infected with bird flu. So it's a very severe disease.
Although these symptoms are sometimes confused with the common cold, this influenza is a severe disease with much harsher consequences.
A person in full coveralls and mask enters a room and selects a vial of red liquid. It goes under a microscope. Words read Dr. Jennifer McKim-Breshkin, Virology Project Leader, CSIRO.
And the particular strain we're talking about at the moment is an H5N1. What does the H mean? What does the N mean? These are 2 little spikes that are on the surface of a flu virus, and that's how we name every type of flu virus. There's 16 different types of H and 9 different types of N.
Now in an animation, orange and blue spikes stick out from a yellow ball. An orange stalk is labeled H. A blue spike with a flat head like a thumbtack is labeled N.
So we have an H of one type and an N of another type. So what we're currently seeing in the bird flu, as everyone is calling it, is the H5 type and the N1 type. So we call it H5N1.
Now a black and white microscopic view of dots ringing 4 discs.
Since 2003, the highly virulent H5N1 strain of the virus has infected small numbers of humans throughout the world.
Workers in white coats collect handfuls of baby chicks in garbage bags.
The highest number of deaths occurred from outbreaks in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Egypt.
The major concern now is that this H5N1, or perhaps one of the other avian viruses, might now adapt to infect humans more readily. And then you start to see human-human spread of this new type of virus.
A worker feeds a tube into one of the garbage bags and the bag inflates.
Because humans haven't been exposed to it before, this virus will now be able to spread rapidly through the population, causing probably a high rate of death or certainly a high rate of very ill people.
In a conference room, a panel addresses people who take notes. Then a book is titled Everything You Need to Know About Bird Flu and What You Can Do to Prepare for It.
However, disease control centres around the world are making avian flu their top priority.
But the problem is at this stage we don't really know which strain of bird flu it may be that's going to cause the pandemic. So vaccine manufacturers are making what they call a pre-pandemic vaccine. So this is a vaccine that's based on the current strains of bird flu that are circulating, so the H5N1. And they're getting those ready and testing those on people to make sure that they do actually make antibodies that could protect us.
Experience with the common seasonal flu has shown that it is possible to be vaccinated and still get the disease. It's therefore likely that vaccines for H5N1 will also be less than 100% effective.
In his dark office, the detective strolls and pages through a file.
The biggest problem we have with this one is that it's a suspect that is constantly changing. The moment we think we have it cornered, it changes into something else, and we have to start all over again.
He tosses it on the unsolved pile. Now word summary, avian influenza.
Avian influenza is commonly known as the bird flu. Although it affects mainly birds, it can also infect humans. There are a number of different strains that are constantly changing. It has many symptoms, including fever, sore muscles and throat, and general weakness.
The homicide detective types, and later he taps a finger on the next case file, 004.
SARS. Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. It's a respiratory disease.
Dr. McKim Brushkin.
It's caused by a virus, which is a member of the virus family called coronaviruses.
An animated virus, at least 100 red spikes with heads like sewing pins dot a grey ball.
Now, we actually have all been infected with coronaviruses before because they're common viruses of humans and animals, and they cause common respiratory and enteric diseases. So there's a human cold-like virus that is a coronavirus. So coronaviruses as such are not an unknown sort of virus, but the SARS coronavirus was a new type of coronavirus.
The detective tacks photos to the wall.
There's been one near-pandemic case to date. China, 2002. 8,096 infected cases and 774 deaths. That's a mortality rate of 9.6%. SARS impedes the flow of air into the lungs.
In an exam room, a doctor uses a stethoscope on a patient's back
And reduces the capacity of air that the lungs can hold. SARS is another example of a viral zoonose. Its natural host is the masked palm civet, a relative of the mongoose.
A mammal resembling a small wildcat rests in the tree, jaw dropped to reveal sharp teeth. Now at a street-side market in Asia, raw hunks of meat hang.
It is believed to be contracted to humans through contact with blood or animal tissue during the butchering and ingesting of the animal, which is a delicacy in China. Once within the human host, it was able to spread more rapidly.
Subsequently, they've also found SARS coronavirus in bats. So they're really not quite sure whether the civet cats have spread it to humans through bats or whether they have spread it directly. So the real spread of infection is really not very clear at this case because it mostly seems to have died out.
The transmission of SARS became a huge problem. It could be caught very easily, such as by touching a door handle or breathing infected air molecules. The disease has an incubation period of up to 10 days. This means that the infected patient, who doesn't know they're infected, can travel to other parts of the globe spreading the disease.
A passenger jet takes off.
SARS infection generally looks like a flu-like infection. So people get fever, muscle aches, maybe sore throat, cough. So it's probably very difficult to distinguish originally from flu.
Symptoms usually appear between 2 and 10 days, but up to 13 days have been reported.
Vials of blood are inserted into slots in the cavity of a centrifuge.
In most cases, 10 to 20% of patients require mechanical ventilation to help.